Imagine it. The year is 1850. On Independence Day, there was a big event happening in Washington, D.C. 2 years prior, the Freemasons had laid the symbolic cornerstone of the Washington Monument. Now, George Washington's adopted son slash step grandson was on hand to dedicate a stone from the District of Columbia to the monument. The ceremony was attended by many people of note, but perhaps none of more note than President Zachary Taylor. While the mood may have been that of fanfare, the weather didn't exactly reflect the joy. After all, this is Washington, D.C., and it is July. And D.C. was actually built on a swamp. So it's humid, it's sticky, everyone's sweating. The atmosphere was insufferable, sort of similar to opening an oven door that is on and having that gust of hot air hit you in the face. That's what it felt like. But not everybody had to suffer. And when I say not everybody, I'm referring to the president. After hours of festivities, Taylor had enough. So he started walking home. And he walked along the Potomac before closing out his evening at the White House. When he got there, he was trying to stave off heat exhaustion, so he just consumed copious amounts of cherries, washed them down with copious amounts of ice cold milk. If that sounds like a stomach ache waiting to happen, it was. The next day, he had a stomach ache, but it wasn't so bad to the point where he couldn't get anything done. He was still continuing to work. So this is July 5th now, and he's uncomfortable, but he's okay. But by the time it gets to July 6th, we know there's a problem. He knows there's a problem. His staff knows there's a problem. He is experiencing diarrhea, sharp and severe pains in his stomach, and it is not a good situation. He is no longer able to function. At this point, he was diagnosed by his army doctor, Alexander Witherspoon, as having cholera morbus. By the 8th, his fever had gotten so out of control that they really didn't think he was going to survive it. So he took a moment and said to the doctor attending him, "I should not be surprised if this were to terminate in my death. I did not expect to encounter what has beset me since my elevation to the presidency. God knows I have endeavored to fulfill what I conceive to be an honest duty. But I have been mistaken. My motives have been misconstrued, and my feelings most grossly outraged." The next morning, he called for his wife, and after he asked her to not cry, he said, "I am about to die. I expect the summons very soon. I have tried to discharge my duties faithfully. I regret nothing, but I am sorry that I am about to leave my friends." About 12 hours later, the curtain did do a final calling on the life of Zachary Taylor. He was 65 years old. On July 13th, his funeral procession started, with 100,000 onlookers around the Capitol to watch as his coffin was pulled by his horse, Old Whitey, and in the stirrups were his boots turned backwards. Taylor was placed in a congressional cemetery vault, which was a common practice of the time, temporarily, but as he was put in, it was to a gun salute. A few months later, the former president took a road trip from D.C. to Louisville, Kentucky, where he grew up, and was placed in a vault there. And this is the vault where his wife would join him 2 years later. Nearly 3 decades later, the Commonwealth of Kentucky pulled together money to build him a monument. And in 1883, the 30-foot monument, including a statue of him on top, was unveiled. 40 years after that, Congress got involved and built a new mausoleum for him. And in 1926, the new mausoleum was dedicated to him on Memorial Day. The 16 acres surrounding the monument and the mausoleum became property of the federal government 2 years later, and now is the Zachary Taylor National Cemetery. Now that sounds like it would be the wrap up of a long story, but not quite for Zachary Taylor. As soon as he died, there started to be conspiracy theories about his death. There are a couple reasons for this. One is the speed in which he died. Two is the time in which he died. You have to imagine that there was a lot of animosity on both sides of the equation, considering the North and the South. And he did things that severely angered Southerners, even though he was a slave-holding Southerner himself. There were people who thought that Jefferson Davis poisoned him, or that it was a group of Southerners. I mean, there are so many theories. You could look it up. There's a lot of people who thought all kinds of things, making all kinds of statements. So, after some serious technological advances and some serious persuasion to the descendants, the body of former President Zachary Taylor was exhumed in 1991. But as it turns out, after 140 years, Dr. Witherspoon was right. He had, in fact, died of cholera morbus after all.